Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on, a really fascinating exploration into something that challenges a lot of old assumptions, the deep connection between our minds and our bodies.
Yeah.
How what we think and feel isn't just happening in us, but is actively, shaping our physical self.
Absolutely. And we've got some really rich source material to guide us today. We're drawing from a text called Two Thoughts That Transform the Body. And it weaves together insights from, well, all over neuroscience, psychology, medicine, even the really cutting edge field of epigenetics.
Yeah.
And they all seem to point towards this powerful central idea that our thoughts, our beliefs, our consciousness, they aren't just passive experiences, they're actual forces. They have real, measurable effects on our physical body.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the core arguments from these sources, dig into some of the, frankly, quite surprising research and examples they bring up, and figure out what it all means for you. It's about looking beyond maybe some outdated scientific ideas and seeing the evidence for just how powerful the mind can be. Okay, let's get into it. And the sources suggest starting right with the brain itself and how our whole understanding of it has, well, it's shifted pretty dramatically, hasn't it?
Oh, massively. For a very long time, neuroscience operated under this pretty rigid dogma. The idea was basically once you're an adult, your brain is set, fixed.
Like what you got at birth, was it no new parts?
Pretty much. They thought you couldn't grow new neurons as an adult, and the brain's structure, its connections were relatively static, locked in.
So you were just kind of working with what you had, maybe even losing a bit over time.
That was the dominant view. But as the sources make really clear, that whole idea has been completely overturned in recent decades. We've had groundbreaking studies showing something quite remarkable. The adult human brain can produce new neurons throughout life.
Ah, so that's neuroplasticity.
Exactly. Neuroplasticity. It means the brain is plastic, adaptable. It's anything but static. It's constantly changing its structure, its function. It makes new neurons, sure, but it also builds countless new connections, synapses between existing ones. And whole networks get reorganized, new ones develop based on, well, everything we do and think.
And the source draws a really powerful conclusion from that. Something like, we are not prisoners of the brain we inherited at birth.
That's the line, and it really is a profound shift. It takes us from seeing the brain as this fixed biological destiny to seeing it as this dynamic, adaptable landscape that we can actually influence.
Okay, so the static brain idea is out. But the sources also tackle another really influential, maybe even more pervasive set of ideas.
Ah,
The materialist theories about the mind and brain.
right. This is the viewpoint that essentially says everything we experience is mental, our thoughts, feelings, consciousness, our sense of self, it's all ultimately reducible to physical, biological processes in the brain. The brain creates the mind.
And there are different flavors of this,
Yeah.
right? Like psychophysical identity.
Yes, that's one version. It suggests that, okay, mental events like feeling happy, your subjective experience happen alongside specific brain activity. The objective stuff we can measure, like firing neurons, they run in parallel. But crucially, this theory says the physical brain states cause the mental states. People like Gerald Edelman, Jean-Pierre Changeux are mentioned as proponents.
Brain activity makes the feeling happen.
Got it.
And then there's an even stronger version called eliminativism.
Eliminativism, yeah.
Huh?
Philosophers like Paul and Patricia Churchland, Daniel Dennett, they take it even further. They argue that things like beliefs or desires or even consciousness don't really exist as distinct things at all. They're kind of
Illusions.
illusions, our whole inner world. That's the argument. They see concepts like mind, ego, free will as being like old pre-scientific ideas, folk psychology, that we'll eventually discard as we understand the brain better. We'll just talk about biophysical processes instead.
So they think neuroscience will eventually just eliminate the need for those words.
That's the core idea. Dennett, for instance, is mentioned as arguing that even qualia, the raw feeling of experience, like what red looks like to you, are illusions. It's a very strong stance. Only the physical brain processes are truly real.
Wow. That's a lot to take in. But the sources don't just lay this out, they critique it.
They do offer a significant critique. One point is challenging the claim that neuroscience tools actually measure mental events. The argument is, well, how can you measure something non-physical with a physical tool? A thought doesn't have mass or volume or location in the same way a neuron does.
So you can measure the brain activity when someone's thinking, but not the thought itself.
Precisely. You're measuring correlates, not the thing itself. Another point they challenge is the argument from brain damage. If someone has a stroke and can't speak, materialists might say, see, that brain area creates speech.
Which seems logical on the surface.
It does, but the source argues it's an inaccurate conclusion. What neuroscience methods really show are correlations. Damage to area X correlates with loss of function Y. Activity in area Z correlates with feeling W. But correlation isn't the same as causation, and it's certainly not the same as identity.
Can you run through that EEG example again? That helps make it clearer.
Sure. So imagine someone's looking at a sad picture. You measure their brain waves with an EEG, and you see certain patterns change. They feel sad subjectively. There's a correlation. Changes in EEG readings happen alongside the feeling of sadness. But are the squiggly lines on the EEG the feeling of sadness?
No, obviously not. One's electrical activity, the other's a feeling.
Exactly. So the correlation doesn't prove the brainwaves cause the sadness or are the sadness. They just happen together.
It's like saying the rain gauge causes the rain because they correlate.
A good analogy. And this leads to a specific logical error the source says materialists often commit, called the mereological fallacy.
Okay, what's that? Mereological.
It means wrongly attributing properties of the whole person, like being conscious or thinking or deciding, to just a part of the person, specifically the brain. The source argues materialists do this when they talk as if the brain thinks, or the brain decides.
But isn't it the brain doing the thinking?
The brain is absolutely necessary for thinking, but it's the person, the whole individual, who thinks, who is conscious, who decides. Attributing consciousness solely to the brain or a part of it is the fallacy. It treats the brain like this isolated, all-powerful entity rather than a part of a larger conscious being.
That distinction feels important. It shifts the focus back to the person. And this whole discussion about mind, brain, and causality sets the stage perfectly for one of the most compelling phenomena that challenges a purely materialist view: the placebo effect.
Ah, the placebo effect. It's truly fascinating. Doctors have known forever, really, that what a patient believes about a treatment can massively affect the outcome. Even if the treatment itself is, say, a sugar pill or a saline shot, biologically inert.
It works because you think it will work.
That's the essence of it. And in clinical trials, researchers often see it as this sort of nuisance variable they need to control for, right? Using double-blind studies where neither the patient nor the doctor knows who's getting the real drug versus the placebo.
They try to subtract its effect out.
Exactly, to isolate the real effect of the drug or procedure. But the source suggests maybe the placebo effect itself is telling us something incredibly important about how mind influences body. They highlight this amazing study by Dr. David Calms on vertebroplasty.
Vertebroplasty. That's injecting cement into broken vertebrae for pain relief.
Correct. Calms had done loads of these, saw good results, but suspected something more than just the cement was at play. So he designed this really rigorous trial comparing the actual surgery to a sham or placebo surgery.
And the sham surgery had to be convincing, right?
Incredibly so. Patients in both groups got the same prep, same anesthetic. For the placebo group, the surgeons mimicked everything, made an incision, cracked open the cement container nearby so the patient got the smell, pressed on their back, even said things like, okay, the cement is going in now.
Wow, they really went all out on the theater of it. And the source tells the story of Bonnie Anderson.
Yes, Bonnie Anderson. She was 76, severe pain from a fractured vertebra, couldn't walk properly. She was in the study, and she received the fake surgery.
And a result.
1 week later, she was playing golf.
Playing golf after a fake spine surgery. That's mind-blowing.
It really is, and the overall study results were just as striking. When they analyzed all the patients, there was no statistically significant difference in pain relief or improvement in function between the group that got the real cement injection and the group that got the elaborate fake procedure.
So the belief, the expectation, the whole ritual of treatment was essentially as powerful as the physical intervention itself in that case.
It appeared to be, yes. And the sources emphasize that this isn't just a one-off. Meta-analyses, combining data from many, many studies, consistently show the placebo effect is a major factor across almost all kinds of treatments, medical and psychological.
Like that Kirshen-Sapirstein analysis of antidepressant trials.
Exactly. They looked at over 19 trials, more than 2,000 patients with mood disorders. Their finding was staggering.
What was it again?
They concluded that about 75%, 3/4 of the positive outcomes seen in those antidepressant trials were actually due to the placebo effect.
75%. That's not just some small background noise. That's the main event for many people.
It really reframes how we think about what's making people better. And the research points to factors that boost this response. Strong belief in the treatment, trust in the person giving it, whether it's your GP or a traditional healer hope, positive emotions, expecting to get better, even just a warm, caring attitude from the therapist. All these psychological things seem to kickstart the body's own healing mechanisms.
Okay, but if positive belief can heal, does negative belief harm? Does it work both ways?
It certainly seems to. That's the nocebo effect, essentially the placebo's dark twin. It's when negative expectations about something lead to negative physical symptoms.
Like what sort of symptoms?
Things like drowsiness, nausea, fatigue, headaches, insomnia. The sources say it often happens when people are warned about potential side effects of a medication.
So just hearing that a drug might cause dizziness makes you more likely to feel dizzy.
Significantly more likely, yes.
Yeah.
Even if you got a placebo pill. Or even if you got the real drug, the expectation can amplify a potential minor side effect into something much more noticeable.
There's that anecdote from Dr. Bernie Siegel's book, the chemotherapy one.
Yes, a really stark example. In a trial for a new chemo drug, the placebo group got saline injections, but were told they might be getting the real drug and that chemo can cause hair loss.
Sure.
30% of the patients receiving only salt water lost their hair.
30%?
Yeah.
Just from the suggestion and the belief. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And kind of scary.
It shows the power of suggestion and expectation. Another example given is a trial for finasteride, a drug for prostate enlargement. One group of men was explicitly warned it could cause erectile dysfunction, ED.
Okay.
In that warned group, 44% reported experiencing ED. In the group that got the same drug but wasn't specifically warned about that side effect, only 15% reported ED. Big difference, likely driven by expectation.
And it's not just in trials, right? The Tokyo subway attack example.
Right, the sarin gas attack in 1995. Afterwards, hospitals saw a wave of people reporting symptoms like nausea and dizziness, symptoms widely publicized as being caused by sarin. But many of these people, the so-called worried well, hadn't actually been exposed.
Their fear and expectation triggered the symptoms.
It appears so. The source notes this is common with invisible threats like chemicals or radiation. The anxiety and the strong belief you've been exposed can manifest real physical symptoms.
So placebo and nocebo. Positive and negative expectations clearly have physical consequences. What's going on in the brain during all this? Is it just in the mind, or is the brain involved?
Oh, the brain is definitely involved. These aren't just in the mind in some abstract way. Placebo and nocebo responses are associated with measurable changes in brain activity and neurochemistry. That Parkinson's disease study using PET scans is a fantastic example for placebo.
Remind me how that one worked.
Okay, so Parkinson's involves a lack of dopamine in a brain area called the basal ganglia. Researchers used PET scans to see how patients' brains responded to either a real dopamine-boosting drug, apomorphine, or a saline placebo. Crucially, they told the patients receiving the placebo that it was a potent drug expected to improve their movement.
And what did the PET scans show in the placebo group?
A really dramatic increase in dopamine activity right there in the basal ganglia. The brain physically released more dopamine, its own natural chemical, simply because the patient expected a benefit. And the level of this dopamine increase was comparable to what they saw from a therapeutic dose of the actual drug.
Wow, so the brain produced its own medicine just based on belief.
That's a great way to put it. The expectation literally changed the brain's chemistry. And while there's less direct brain imaging for nocebos, mainly for ethical reasons, you don't want to deliberately make people feel bad with placebos unnecessarily. The studies focusing on pain show the same principle.
What do they show?
They show that expecting pain makes it worse, physically. When people are led to anticipate more pain, brain imaging shows increased activity in the very brain regions that process pain signals. Conversely, expecting pain relief reduces activity in those same pain processing areas. Our expectations tune the brain's sensitivity.
This all points so strongly towards our mental state actively driving physical changes, which leads naturally into the next area the sources cover, how we manage our emotions.
Yes, emotions, they're complex, aren't they? Involving physiological shifts, heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tension, cognitive appraisal, how we interpret things, behaviors, and that inner subjective feeling. Usually a response to something internal or external.
And hugely important for decision-making, navigating life.
Absolutely. But as the source points out, when negative emotions become chronic or overwhelming, they cause suffering and problems. The encouraging part is that humans seem uniquely equipped to learn to manage these responses.
And this ability is tied to specific brain structures.
Primarily, yes. The sort of raw initial emotional reactions often stem from the limbic system, the emotional brain, which is evolutionarily older, something we share with other mammals. But the key for conscious control is the prefrontal lobe.
The part of the front, The source called it the organ of civilization.
That's the phrase. It's the most recently evolved part, much more developed in humans, and it's where our rational thinking, planning, and executive control reside. And crucially, there are strong connections running from the prefrontal lobe down to the emotional limbic system.
And those connections do what? Put the brakes on.
Essentially, yes. They transmit inhibitory signals. This allows the prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, to exert a degree of voluntary control over the intensity and expression of emotions bubbling up from the limbic system. This capacity is a core part of what we call emotional intelligence.
And the author of the source material did some pioneering fMRI research on this very process.
Yes, some fascinating early studies. One involved young men watching erotic film clips while in an fMRI scanner. In one condition, they just reacted normally. In another, they were instructed to use cognitive distancing to view the clips like a detached, objective scientist.
And could they actually change how they felt just by thinking differently?
They reported they could, yes. Subjectively, they felt significantly less aroused when using the distancing technique.
And the brain scans reflected that subjective report.
Perfectly. In the react normally condition, areas in the emotional brain lit up, as you'd expect, but during cognitive distancing, no significant activation was detected in those emotional areas. Instead, they saw increased activity in the prefrontal lobe.
So the thinking part of the brain seemed to be actively dampening the emotional part.
That was the interpretation. They did a similar study with young women managing sadness induced by watching sad film clips about death and loss. Same pattern. Using cognitive strategies to regulate the sadness correlated with decreased activity in the emotional brain and increased activity in the prefrontal cortex.
This seems to fly in the face of the idea that we're just reactive biological machines, doesn't it?
It strongly suggests otherwise. The conclusion drawn is that healthy adults aren't just puppets of their emotions. We are neurobiologically wired via the prefrontal cortex for conscious, voluntary self-regulation of our emotional responses and even the underlying brain activity. But, and this is key, this capacity has to be activated consciously and voluntarily by the person.
It doesn't just happen automatically. You have to direct it. And they also looked at brain chemistry with PT scans, specifically serotonin.
Yes, another clever study. They had participants deliberately induce feelings of either intense joy or sadness by recalling powerful personal memories. They sustained these feelings while PET scans measured serotonin synthesis in their brains.
And did the brain chemistry actually change based on the self-induced emotion?
It did. When participants reported feeling intense sadness, the PET scans showed a corresponding decrease in serotonin production in key emotional brain regions. When they reported feeling intense joy, the scans showed an increase in serotonin production in those same regions.
And that fits with what we know about serotonin and depression, right? Less serotonin often correlates with depression.
Exactly. So this study suggested that consciously directing your emotional state through memory recall could directly influence the levels of a crucial neurotransmitter. This ability to intentionally shape our brain state through mental focus is really central to the next topic: meditation. Meditation covers a whole range of techniques, really, aimed at training the mind, improving focus, emotional balance, well-being. And the research over the last decade or so has piled up, showing that intentionally directing your attention this way leads to real, measurable neuroplastic changes in the brain.
The sources break meditation down into two main types.
Broadly, yes. There's concentration meditation, where you focus tightly on one thing, your breath, maybe a visual image, a mantra, or sound. EE studies looking at brain waves during this often show increased high-frequency activity, like beta-2 and gamma waves, linked to focused attention.
Okay, focused attention. What's the other type?
Mindfulness meditation. This is more about open awareness, letting thoughts, feelings, sensations come and go without getting caught up in them, without judging them, just maintaining this kind of detached, observant presence. EEG studies here often show increases in slower brain waves, alpha and theta, which are associated with relaxation and deeper meditative states. Theta especially seems to increase with expertise.
Both sound like they aim to quiet that constant internal chatter we all have.
It's a common description. They both tend to slow down that internal monologue, leading to feelings of calm, serenity, maybe a less constricted sense of self.
And mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, is mentioned as a popular program using these ideas.
Yes, MBSR is a well-researched 8-week program that incorporates mindfulness. Studies show it's pretty effective for reducing stress, anxiety, depression, and also for increasing things like well-being and compassion.
The study on Tibetan monks and gamma waves sounds particularly striking.
Oh, it really was. These were very experienced Buddhist monks practicing a specific meditation on non-referential compassion, basically, boundless goodwill towards all beings. While they meditated, EEG readings showed this absolutely huge surge in gamma wave activity compared to their normal resting
It's
state.
huge, sir.
Massive. And what was fascinating was the more years of practice a monk had, the stronger and longer lasting this gamma activity was. It even lingered after they stopped meditating, suggesting it wasn't just a temporary state change, but a change in their baseline brain function.
Wow, so practice literally trains the brain to operate differently, even when you're not actively meditating.
That's the strong implication. And overall, EEG research supports the idea that different meditation styles have different signatures in the brain, matching the different subjective experiences they cultivate.
And it's not just brainwaves. We're talking actual physical changes too, right? From MRI studies.
Yeah, exactly. This is where neuroplasticity gets really concrete. The author's own fMRI study compared experienced Zen meditators to novices while they looked at emotional pictures. Both groups felt the pictures were less intense when they adopted a mindful stance. But the brains of the experienced meditators showed significantly less activity in emotional regions during mindfulness compared to the novices.
Suggesting their training had helped them become less emotionally reactive at a brain level.
Precisely. It points to a calmer baseline state. Other fMRI work shows meditation can boost activity in areas for attention and empathy, but the anatomical MRI studies are maybe even more compelling.
Because they show changes in the brain structure.
Yes. Just like practicing piano thickens gray matter in auditory and motor cortex, or learning to juggle changes areas for visual motor coordination, meditation practice leads to structural changes. Studies report increased gray matter density, more neuron cell bodies in regions crucial for learning, memory, self-awareness, empathy, and regulating emotions.
And changes in the wiring too.
Changes in white matter tracks, the communication pathways, particularly in areas related to attention and emotion management. It's physical evidence that mental training reshapes the physical organ of the brain.
It's incredible. Our thoughts and attention can sculpt our brain matter. And this idea of mind influencing the physical leads us to the even broader concept of the psychosomatic network.
Right. For a long time, the immune system, the nervous system, the endocrine hormonal system, they were often studied in isolation, especially the immune system, which was seen as largely autonomous.
But that view is outdated now.
Completely. Research over the last, say, 30 years has shown extensive, constant bidirectional communication. The brain talks to the immune system via nerves and hormones, and immune cells release substances, cytokines, that signal back to the brain. And the endocrine system is woven through all of it.
So they're all constantly talking to each other. That's the psychosomatic network.
Exactly. Psychoneuroimmunology, or PNI, is the field that studies these interactions. Mind, psycho, nervous system, neuro, immune system, immunology, and the endocrine system is implicitly included. They all use a common biochemical language. Neurotransmitters, hormones, cytokines act as information substances carrying messages back and forth.
And through this network, our thoughts and feelings get translated into chemical signals that influence our health.
That's the fundamental insight of PNI. Psychological states, our subjective experiences, are chemically encoded and broadcast throughout this network, influencing everything from our risk of getting sick to how well we recover. PNI shows psychological factors are key determinants in the cause, progression, and outcome of diseases.
Stress is the classic example, isn't it?
It's the most studied, for sure. Stress triggers the release of cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. A little bit helps us mobilize, but chronic stress hammers the system, especially immunity. The sources list examples. Stress makes infections last longer or hit harder. It can reactivate dormant viruses like cold sores. It slows down wound healing.
Like those students whose vaccines didn't take properly during exams.
Exactly. The stress seemed to impair their immune response. In situations where you feel powerless long-term unemployment, coping with a disaster seemed particularly bad for immunity. Chronic negative emotions like depression are also linked to poorer health outcomes and increased mortality, like the higher risk observed in recently bereaved spouses.
So negative states clearly take a physical toll. Does it work the other way? Can positive emotions actually boost health?
The evidence suggests they can. There was that flu study where they quarantined people, exposed them to a flu virus. Those who generally had a more positive emotional style were less likely to actually develop flu symptoms. Positive states are also linked to lower mortality rates overall.
A lot of this seems like unconscious influence. Stress just happens. Positive feelings might buffer us. But can we consciously influence this network?
The sources argue strong that we can. Studies using things like relaxation techniques, guided mental imagery, particularly with cancer patients, show tangible benefits. These practices can reduce anxiety, depression, cut down on chemo side effects like nausea, sometimes even show increases in certain immune cell activity, and generally improve quality of life.
And the David Seidler story, the playwright, that's presented as a really dramatic example of conscious influence, although it's anecdotal.
It's a powerful story. David Seidler, who wrote The King's Speech, got bladder cancer. He initially resisted standard chemo and bladder removal, trying other things. When the cancer came back and surgery was scheduled, his wife made a rather unusual suggestion.
The visualization thing.
Yeah. She suggested he spend 2 weeks intensely visualizing a perfectly healthy bladder. He apparently thought it was absurd at first.
I can imagine.
But facing surgery, he figured, what's to lose? So he committed hours a day for 2 weeks, vividly imagining a healthy bladder.
And when he went for the pre-op checks,
The urologist was stunned. The cancer was just gone.
completely gone.
That's the story. Disappeared before the surgery. And apparently, it never came back. Seidler himself credited his survival partly to this intense visualization, refusing self-pity, and actively using his imagination, the same tool he used for writing, to seemingly influence his physical body.
That story pushes the boundaries, suggesting influence right down to the cellular level. Which brings us to the final, maybe most revolutionary idea. Epigenetics. The mind influencing our genes.
This is really where things get fascinating, and it directly challenges the old idea of genetic determinism. The belief that our genes are our destiny, controlling everything, making us victims of our inheritance.
The idea that your DNA blueprint fixes your fate.
Exactly. And that view, the source points out, is still pretty common in how genetics is sometimes portrayed. But epigenetics flips the script.
So what is epigenetics? How does it work?
Epi means above or on top of. So epigenetics is about the control system on top of the genes. It studies how signals from the environment switch genes on or off, or turn their activity up or down, without changing the underlying DNA sequence itself. Think of your DNA as the hardware, and epigenetics as the software determining which programs run.
And environment here isn't just outside factors like diet or pollution.
No, this is crucial. The environment that influences gene expression includes our internal environment. And that internal environment is profoundly shaped by our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, our stress levels, our subjective experiences.
Wait, so our thoughts and feelings can act as signals that tell our genes what to do, whether it be active or inactive.
That's the radical discovery, yes. Our genetic makeup isn't solely in control. Our mental and emotional states are constantly influencing the expression of our genes. Bruce Lipton's model suggests a pathway. Thoughts, emotions affect brain chemistry, affects body biochemistry, changes the environment around our cells, influences which genes inside those cells are turned on or off.
Which is why the source calls us epigenetic engineers.
It implies we have this potential to consciously participate in regulating our own gene expression. By cultivating positive thoughts, helpful beliefs, managing stress, generating positive emotions, we're sending biochemical signals that can potentially optimize our genetic activity. Meditation is suggested as one powerful way to do this.
Is there actual research showing this? Mind-body practices changing gene expression.
Yes. The work by Herbert Benson's group is highlighted. In one study, they compared gene expression profiles of long-term meditators or yoga practitioners, average 9 years practice, with healthy controls who didn't practice.
And the results?
Huge differences. They found over 2,200 genes were being expressed differently between the groups. And these weren't random genes. They were involved in pathways related to stress response, inflammation, energy metabolism, and cellular aging. Genes linked to good health were essentially more active or appropriately regulated in the long-term practitioners.
So it's not different genes, but the same genes behaving differently depending on the practice.
Exactly. The expression was altered. Then they did a follow-up. They took a group of novices and put them through an 8-week relaxation response training program, meditation, visualization, breathing.
And after just 8 weeks, could they see changes?
Remarkable changes. Over 1,500 genes significantly changed their expression patterns in the beginners after just 2 months. And hundreds of their genetic signatures started to resemble those of the long-term experts.
That's incredible. It shows you don't need decades of practice. You can start influencing your gene expression relatively quickly.
It's profoundly hopeful. Other findings are mentioned too. Positive emotions linked to increased expression of genes for immune NK cells. And another study found 3 months of intensive meditation led to a 30% boost in the activity of telomerase.
Telomerase. That's the enzyme related to aging.
Yes, it helps maintain telomeres, the protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes. Telomeres shorten as cells age, so longer telomeres or better maintenance is linked to cellular longevity.
So meditation might actually slow down aging at the cellular level by influencing this enzyme.
That's the tantalizing implication. It suggests our mental practices could impact the fundamental processes of cellular aging via epigenetic mechanisms. So when you pull it all together, as we've done in this deep dive, the picture that emerges from these sources is just fundamentally different from that old mechanical view of ourselves. The static brain, the body just running on fixed biological programs separate from the mind. That seems really incomplete now.
Yeah, we've covered so much ground. From the brain's amazing plasticity, the fact that it can change, to the sheer power of belief shown by the placebo and nocebo effects, where expectation can literally mimic or even cause physical changes.
And we've seen the evidence that we're not just passive recipients of our emotions. We have this capacity, rooted in our prefrontal cortex, to consciously regulate them, influencing our brain activity and even neurochemistry like serotonin. Practices like meditation don't just feel good. They demonstrably reshape the brain's function and structure over time.
Then there's the whole psychosomatic network, understanding how our mental state gets chemically translated, affecting our nerves, hormones, immunity, influencing our susceptibility to illness, how we heal.
And maybe the most mind-bending part is epigenetics. The realization that our thoughts, feelings, our conscious choices aren't just fleeting things. They are signals that reach right down to the level of our DNA, influencing which genes are switched on or off, potentially affecting everything from our stress response to maybe even how quickly our cells age.
It really feels like the core message, cutting across all these different lines of evidence, is incredibly empowering. It's saying, you are not just a passive spectator of your own biology. You're an active participant, an epigenetic engineer, as the source puts it, with a scientifically grounded ability to influence your physical reality through your mind.
Which really leads to a fascinating question, doesn't it? If our thoughts and emotions can modulate gene expression, if they can impact cellular aging markers like telomerase, what else? What other fundamental aspects of our physical existence might be accessible to this power of conscious influence?
That is definitely something worth pondering as you continue your own deep dive into these connections.